All right, so I actually was in the process of evaluating between two different phones. I have the Apple iPhone, which is obviously the standard across, I'd say, the majority of the phone market. And I have the Galaxy S25 Ultra. And so I was kind of torn between deciding between these two phones because one of the major factors is I spend a lot of time with my work in my vehicle. And so I wanted to put it to the ultimate test of Apple CarPlay versus Android Auto. What's the better system for your vehicle? Is there a difference? So I basically have synced the phones to look and act the exact same in their functionality. It's the same apps downloaded. It's the same contacts, everything within the system. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this step by step on the interactions here in my Ford F-150 Lightning. Obviously, we have the big built-in display here, so you'll get a really good large view of the CarPlay and its functionality. But, as a starting point for this test, you can kind of see that I have the same backdrop. I downloaded all the exact same apps within the device, so everything should be the exact same standard between the two devices. Now, my vehicle's turned off currently, so what I'm going to do is we're going to start with the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, and we are going to look at across the board what is the different turn-on experience, how quickly does my vehicle engage into Android Auto. Then we're going to look at some of the features on the screen of what Android Auto looks like. So if you're considering purchasing an Android, what does that look like with Android Auto within your phone? What are some of the functionality with it? And then we'll flip over and we'll look at Apple CarPlay. We'll do a startup from the vehicle being off of how quickly it engages in the vehicle when you get in, and also some of the features that are associated with it. Same starting point, same device, or different devices obviously, but same starting point, and that way we can kind of see the difference between the two. So kind of curious to see which one's better. I've been using both systems now for several days. I've used CarPlay for a long time, but I've been in Android Auto for several days and wanted to provide some honest feedback between the two. So let's dive on in and see what the primary difference is between Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So up first we have the Galaxy S25 Ultra. I got this phone about a week ago and decided to give it a test run to see how it would work within the systems of my work. Obviously these phones specifically have an attraction to them because a lot of the technology has stayed a step ahead of Apple with what the features are. This one has obviously the stylus, which, take it or leave it. It provides that functionality. The camera is a 200 megapixel camera. Some of the systems within it are better. The battery life is advertised to be a little bit better. And so it piqued my curiosity. But one of the major questions that I had was, how does this device work within my Lightning? And so we are going to turn the vehicle on and take a peek under the hood of Android Auto. And so first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the vehicle on and look at the auto connectivity of the vehicle to Android Auto. And so when you fire up the vehicle, it recognizes that my Ultra has connected with the vehicle. It's going to process into Android Auto now, and bam, just like that, we are connected. It's automatically starting my audiobook. And so, yeah, as you can kind of see, this is the introductory screen on, obviously, the F-150 Lightning. I have a nice little mounting port here that my MagSafe on both devices can connect to. So I'll leave that there for the duration of this test. Obviously, the very first thing you're greeted with is the multifunctional screen, in which you have the Google Maps linked above. The automatic settings within Google Maps did not feature traffic and did not feature satellite. So when I first plugged it in, it looked similar to this. But you can simply go within the settings. You can turn on the traffic if you like to see the different congestion of the local roadways. And I prefer to drive with the satellite mode on just to see real life landmarks. If you turn 3D buildings on, it eliminates the satellite, so I left that off. So yeah, obviously this is Google Maps, which is a pretty standard function within, but obviously because this is within a Google based software, you're able to see this as the primary. You can turn on or off the audio alerts. I don't like it to interrupt my books or music while I'm listening, and so obviously that's something that is in place. With that being the case, you can center around north up or overview or perspective, which I like to leave it on perspective. You can zoom in and out of your map. It started me out a lot further in, but I was able to zoom it in. And once you zoom it in one time, it keeps that connection in place for you for how you are currently spaced out. And so as you can see, when you select your app icon, it actually does a direct mirror of your phone with the background of your phone, which it didn't fully populate the phone, but it allows you to scroll through the apps. It did pull the background from my Android phone, as you can see in the system here. It's the same background associated, and then it links all of the associated apps. And so in this instance, I have the Ford Sync, which I'm in the Ford, but all of the other apps that are within the system, Spotify, and so on and so forth. And so you have a lot of different control over this function. It's swipeable to get to any of the different apps that you would desire to. The main thing that I will show you though in this, obviously I'm not going to go into every single sub app because everybody's apps are different, but within this control you can go into settings, which is the Android Auto settings specifically, and that is where you end up you can control your message notifications if it wants you to show the first line of the messages, which obviously I did. You can play a message chime, which, like I said earlier, I don't like that interruption in my setup, but this gives you the ability to control several variables, left or right, driver seat location, and so on. The rest of it can be controlled within the phone, but the interactivity of this software was very easy to use, very accessible. And then going into different apps like Spotify, you can then control your different mixes and playlists associated. You can, like I said, you can go into your audiobooks. It's a very functional, different setup with working through some of those basic devices, but very simple to navigate around. In all of these screens, as you noticed, the map never went away, which we'll notice that with what we're looking at within the Apple CarPlay is there's several screens where you kind of get a little bit more lost into the weeds and have to go back and forth between the apps. But I think Android Auto realized that the maps are the central focal point of what you're doing. And so no matter where you go on the screen, it will keep you linked to that unless you go into some of the sub apps, which I haven't given permission to every single sub app. But if you're doing maps or if you're doing that's pulling up its own map. But yeah, if you're going into audiobooks or music controls, all of that, your directional screen and all of the data through Google Maps will remain intact. So yeah, overall, the connection into the vehicle worked very well. One thing I will note is if you get an Android device and you've not used it before, specifically inside and built inside of my Ford Lightning specifically was the chime function. So in the settings of the device, I had turned off the play message chime function. I turned it off, but every time I got a text, it would make a real loud noise over my speaker system, which I had not actually implemented within the Apple product. I never had any issues with this loud chime noise. I turned message chime off, it would still chime. I could not figure out how to turn it off. After doing some research, and this might just be my Lightning specific of an issue, but what I had to do is I actually had to go into my phone list. I had to disconnect from CarPlay. And so when you disconnect from CarPlay, then it allowed me to go into the settings of my phone, and I was able to turn off the notifications here. And so when you went into messaging, I was able to turn off the different alarms and notifications within the phone. And so something to note is if that's something that you're dealing with, you can actually go into the phone settings. This is, obviously Ford's inner working systems, but you were able to turn off the text messaging sounds. So it notifies of text messages, but I turned off the sounds, and that's what solved the issue within this Lightning's displays. But I'll go back into Android Auto and we can take a look at the connectivity again once it's engaged. But the default down here was weather. I could not figure out how to change this function if I wanted to. This was all pretty preset in there, but it did give you the variables of looking at some of your recent notifications if you wanted to do that below, your signal connections, which is great. When a text message came up, it actually covers up, you saw it a little bit earlier, but it actually covers up the weather, shows that text notification. After a while, it will disappear. But overall, you don't expect much from the connectivity portal between the two, but looking at the engagement that I dealt with within Android Auto, I was impressed at the interactivity, the customization of being able to navigate easy and get around to the different apps without any issue or concern. When you get a call in, as you can kind of see, you do have that message across the top that you can choose to answer the phone call. It's a nice little pop-up on top. It does not take up the whole screen. It's a little bar that you can choose to answer or decline. In this situation, I'm going to decline Jesse because I can decline Jesse. In that instance, though, it's a nice little pop-up up top. You can see different functionality of like the messaging that pops up below. But it's highly interactive, and I've enjoyed the customization and the functionality of that metric.
Currently in gray, it's 64 degrees and mostly sunny. Today, it'll be mostly sunny with a forecasted high of 69 and a low of 36.
So the weather app will just straight up dictate the weather to you. The Google-based apps are obviously designed for this type of software. So Google Weather would be that way. Google News will let you have the different newscasts and availability based on that. But I'm sure if you select these, it's going to run an auto message there.
I'm Jessica Ettinger, CNBC. Losses are getting worse on Wall Street this afternoon.
So it gives you the versatility to scroll through different news avenues based on what you choose to do through the Google News platform. Other than that, Google-wise messages, you can pull up your different messages that you have and have responses and replies, and it'll play the messages for you should you choose to. But yeah, that's pretty much all that we will showcase for this. And now we will go from the Galaxy S25 in Android Auto, and we will move it over to the iPhone Apple CarPlay. And so now we are going to take the Apple iPhone and we are going to do the exact same set of tasks. The vehicle is completely off. Like I said, it's the same set of apps, same set of functionality. I'm going to put it on my little remote charger here, and we're going to fire up the vehicle. So it was pretty quick to snap into Apple CarPlay. I can say from experience, sometimes I think when the software has not been engaged for a minute, it does take a little bit longer to connect. Nonetheless, when you fire up Apple CarPlay, you can see a very similar set of data. Obviously, this is the Apple Maps system, some directions to some local, it recognizes some local places you attend. I had my home address punched in, but also you have the recommended music play within that. Very similar to below, you have the functionality to control or to see the signal measurements and the battery, but there's no ability to see recent notifications through this. So compared to Android Auto did let you see recent notifications. This does not provide that amenity. Looking below as well, you do have the versatility to select the app for the maps and see the very full viewing of it. The Apple Maps systems are not quite as, in my opinion, quite as intuitive as the Google Maps. You cannot do aerial views, for instance. You can do 3D, which doesn't really change much, but they don't have the ability to do satellite imagery through Apple Maps itself within the CarPlay. Nonetheless, it's a functional Maps apps. However, similar to the Android Auto, if you did prefer Apple Maps, you can scroll over, go to Google Maps. Once you go into the system, it will recognize the same functions. It's a very similar setup. And when you go back to the full mapping setup, then it will put it into a similar type setup as you saw with Android Auto. This doesn't have the same recognized devices, but difference between Apple and Android, as you can see, the Maps is less of the screen. There's more functionality to this, and there's not much ability to control the sizing of this. So I did appreciate the other one gave you more emphasis on the Maps and less emphasis on the music, because it's easy just to change the music metrics when it's running. Nonetheless, when you get into the main Apple CarPlay systems, it does recognize and pull the same set of app data. However, this is the same set of apps, but you can see that it does not actually pull all the same apps. Google came with some of their self-prescribed apps that allowed you to check on the news, like we showcased, and some of the other variables. There is the news button. And so it's similar to the Google. You can go in and select their recommended news stories, but they don't have all the different channels that were linked. Within audiobooks, I have the same Audible and things in place, and so you can see that was the Apple audiobooks. Audible would be the exact same way, and so if you went into the different lists that you have, it would link in here and allow you to connect. Within the settings of Apple CarPlay, this is very much more looking like iPhone. You can control the wallpaper, but it does not replicate your phone directly. You can control the different color schemes should you choose to, like that, but it does not replicate your phone similar to what Android Auto did. Announce messages, which is very similar to the last setting. It's its own thing. You can turn on announcements, turn off announcements. Silent mode, accessibility, Siri, and suggestions. You can turn on whether or not Siri will work. Same thing with Apple. Show album artwork for music, but this is the full extent of the settings that you can control for Apple CarPlay. Once again, as you're scrolling through the apps, you can kind of see the different functions that were available comparative to the two. Not much difference in that regard, but within the phone app system specifically, you can see your different contacts, who you've called recently. You can use Siri to make a call. If you're not in motion, the camera or the keypad will pull up and let you select between the different variables, and you can go back and listen to voicemail should you choose to. And then within messages specifically, you can see your recent messages. You can click one and it'll notify you of when a message is received. Nonetheless, that's something that you do have to auditory listen and respond accordingly. It says have Apple Podcasts, which is their proprietary app for that specifically. Apple Calendar will pull your calendar through their system. Outside of that, though, that looks like the only specific proprietary apps. But nonetheless, this is your main control screen. But as you can tell before, while you're scrolling through apps, you cannot view your maps and the other variable like I was showing the other one. When you go to Audible here, while you're controlling Audible and changing musics, the Apple Maps is completely gone. So it's a singular function. You do not have that capability of scrolling through. Oh, look, there's my kids' music. There's no capability of scrolling through the music and going back to your mapping system at the same time. You can, once you selected like your album, if you want to change the song or skip forward in this book, for instance, you can do that from this function. You can click the link, it'll take you back, but there's not the ability to do as much interaction from the main screen. But yeah, outside of that, that's pretty much it to know with Apple CarPlay. Once again, you're not looking for a ton of functionality from your device, because obviously it's not your main function while driving. For me, the most important thing is mapping. Can it get me from A to B and be directionally accurate? Two, what is the customization of accessing your music and some of those other features that you use, like my audiobooks? And so you can kind of see the controls between the different apps there. And you can go into Spotify and control your different music metrics through here, should you choose to. Nonetheless, it is, like I said, you'd have less versatility to go back and forth between the apps as you did with the Samsung. And so the question becomes, what is the better and more functional device for interacting with your car? Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. And in my opinion, I don't think that either way you're going to lose gigantic functionality. I had a lot of apprehension when starting to utilize the Android because I was worried about the functionality. I liked Apple CarPlay and what that functionality has been, and I've had it for years. In using both devices, I have now of the opinion that I actually slightly would prefer Android Auto over Apple CarPlay, solely because, as we saw, you had the additional functionality of seeing some of those features like the background replicated. I love the fact that the map is not disappearing when you're utilizing your different apps. And so when I'm trying to change the music, I lose my mapping system on here, or change the podcast episode on Turn Down for What. However, that's one of the things that in Apple CarPlay specifically, you lose that versatility to where when you go to Google Maps, you can see it in the main screen. But on Android Auto, I can change the music, change the playlist, and do a lot more functional things without losing my mapping systems. And so if you're in a location where you might want to change a variable like that, you're going to lose that functionality within the Apple CarPlay setup. That's not the end of the world by any means, but if I had to pick the difference between Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, something that minor can make the difference between the two. I have been on road trips before with Apple CarPlay in which, as I was accessing the system and as I was moving around, I was driving in an area that I needed the mapping system up, but I wanted to change the music or hang up a phone call, and I lose that functionality having to go back and forth. I did not receive a call on the Apple CarPlay. But what I will say is when you get a call on Apple CarPlay, it does take the entire screen. And so once again, you lose that mapping functionality, where in Android Auto, it keeps a bar at the top to where you can control but still see everything. And so I do think that that's a function that Apple could learn from in their implementations. I do like that versatility where you have the capability of keeping this main screen control in place. A lot of times when I'm on a road trip, I might just keep it on the mapping system specifically. However, that's something that even in Google Maps in the Apple system, it's just not as intuitive to scroll around. Android Auto lets you move around the map. I can't do that same thing from Apple CarPlay, and it gives you a little bit. More versatility in the mapping system in Apple Maps itself to move around. But if you want the Google Maps, if you want that satellite imagery, Android Auto would shine because within the Google Maps systems in Apple CarPlay, the Google Maps app is not that functional. In the Apple CarPlay, in the Android Auto, I got to see some of those variables like it recommends charging stations in the vicinity. Like I said, the Google Maps system in Apple CarPlay is not the same. And so it is something to consider if you prefer that. Android Auto actually would shine in that regard. But Apple, being Apple, I've used Apple CarPlay for years and have not had any massive grievances with Apple CarPlay. I do wish the Google Maps was more functional. However, that's something that, if you are using a mapping app, you can use a different app if you prefer, or you can work within the functionality that it has to get to your target. So overall, I do think that Android Auto does shine a little bit more than Apple CarPlay. And yet, if you are a user and you're really torn between the two, whether you're transitioning from Samsung to Apple or Apple to Samsung, you're not going to be in a bad situation where you can't figure out how to easily identify the software. Both are very intuitive, both are very liked, but that's something that in the difference between the two, you're welcome to kind of comment below and give me your opinion. What do you use? What have you experienced between the two? What is your preference? Have you used both softwares? I wanted to take the phones while they were in the exact same state and be able to put them to the test and see how they stacked up against each other. I think that either way, like I've said, you're not going to lose in using the basic functionality of what most of these CarPlay or inside infotainment systems would feature. So that is pretty much it for today and for reviewing Apple CarPlay versus Android Auto. Would love to hear your thoughts on what you feel like is the best software system within. I've gotten mixed reviews and I've spoken to different people within the, obviously every vehicle has that, but within the EV space specifically, the communications between Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So comment below, let me know your thoughts. Feel free to like and subscribe to Turn Down 4 Watt. Thank you for listening to this direct comparison between the two, and stay tuned to our channel. We do lots of different vehicle reviews, and we have a weekly podcast episode where we talk through any EV news and updates. So once again, thank you for tuning in, and tune in to our YouTube channel for more EV news and updates. Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for Watt. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to tune in to more EV news and updates. See you next time.